Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar titled Site Expansion Potential with Business Analyst Online Desktop. My name is Ian Greensmith and I am a higher education analyst with the Education and Research Group at Esri Canada. This webinar will provide an overview of some of the capabilities available within Business Analyst Desktop, an application built on top of ArcGIS Desktop and designed for analyzing data to reveal insights and patterns for your business. Using tools available within Business Analyst, you can perform analysis of demographic and consumer data and combine this with your own data to strengthen your understanding of your customers, competition, market, and even trends. This webinar is intended or targeted towards professors, instructors, and teaching assistants who are interested in using Business Analyst Desktop in their courses. This webinar is designed to help teaching faculty learn more about Business Analyst Desktop through a site analysis workflow that can be either replicated or applied to meet their needs. In this webinar, you'll learn more about accessing the Business Analyst application, creating a project, and setting up your analysis extent. You'll also learn how to add your own business and customer information. Similar to the webinar run last week on Business Analyst Online, we'll be using a case study to assess the expansion potential of a popular restaurant chain in St. John's, Newfoundland, where in the process you'll learn how to compare current and candidate sites to competitor listings using the NAICS or SIC codes, how to perform simple trade area analysis, and how to actually rank candidate sites against your best performing location. To get to that point, it's beneficial to understand where the Business Analyst product suite fits in relation to the ArcGIS products that you may already be comfortable with. The ArcGIS platform has a number of different components. While ArcGIS Desktop is still the most common way for you to manage your data, to perform analysis, and even to produce cartographic maps, the platform has changed over the years and can now leverage the cloud to publish that same data as hosted services, whether it's through server, through portal, or even through ArcGIS Online, where once available as a service, there are a wide range of applications that can consume these services, thus creating an opportunity for wider dissemination across your campus and access through applications that are easy to use. The end result are purpose-built applications, and by extension, this is where the Business Analyst product suite comes in. Business Analyst is built on top of existing ArcGIS applications that can run locally on your desktop, can be consumed as a service through a web browser, or run natively on a mobile device. Business Analyst Desktop, the Canadian edition, has a series of wizard-driven tools that enable, among other things, detailed, justifiable recommendations on where to locate, expand, and consolidate a business. The wizard makes the tools easier to use, and they're grouped based on similar functionality. The application, in which I'll introduce you to in a moment, blends seamlessly with ArcGIS Desktop, as you can see on the screen, through a window and subsequent toolbar and menus that you would use. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit more about what's included with Business Analyst Desktop in terms of data, and also compare that application to what we talked about last week with regards to Business Analyst Online. If you're familiar with Desktop GIS, the application is only useful if the application works, and that's true. But the user must have reliable and accurate data from which you can define your criteria and answer your research questions. The data included with Business Analyst Desktop and Online, for that matter, are annually updated and include demographic data, nationwide business data points, shopping centers, streets, geocoding locators, and so on, as can be shown on the slide. In Canada, Esri's partnered with Environics Analytics to offer a comprehensive set of demographic and lifestyle maps for Canadian data, and that's a big part of what is included in both the Business Analyst Desktop and in Business Analyst Online. The difference is the level of aggregation. as noted on the slide. The license that I'll show you, actually the version that I'm using in today's webinar is Business Analyst Desktop Standard and has national level data. For this webinar, we're going to focus only on a few of the capabilities that will illustrate the power of Business Analyst Desktop as applied to this workflow. But specifically, we're going to apply it to a case study. But first, let's set up and go through the application, set up our study area, and that'll kind of set our foundation for the rest of the session. So with Business Analyst Desktop open, ultimately it's ArcMap. ArcMap is open, and here on the left-hand side of the screen, I have the Business Analyst window. That's here, and from that, I can set my projects. I even have a list of all the popular tools or favorite tools that are available within it. Beyond that is the Business Analyst toolbar, and that's up here. And this is where, through a Business Analyst menu, I can actually set my study area, even set an analysis extent, and as I'll show you in later slides, add my restaurant data, customer data, business listings, trade areas, and even perform analysis. The first thing we're going to do is actually set our study area. And this is going to be a bit more clear when we get back to the next slide, which introduces our case study. But the case study, again, as I've already talked about in the introductory slide, focuses on St. John's, Newfoundland. So from the Business Analyst menu, I can choose the Study Area Wizard. The Study Area Wizard is just a quick way for you to jump to a location and set up your project. A project or projects are a way of organizing your work. They make it easier to manage, back up, and share your analysis results. This is very similar to another application that you may be familiar with or becoming more familiar with, which is ArcGIS Pro. ArcGIS Pro works on this project basis as well. So all of your analysis, all of your workflows are tied to a specific project and can be shared between projects, but it's important to know which project you're working in. So in this wizard, we're going to create a new study area. You can set it to whatever level of geography, or even can even capture the extent if that's what you want. For the purpose of this webinar, I've already got it set to focus on our census metropolitan areas. So I'll click next. And to illustrate what you can do, you can actually search by name, and you don't have to scroll down the list or through all the provinces. It's IntelliSense, so you can actually type. So if I type St., even just that St. period, I'll get 3 options of which it matches in the database. I have St. John's, Newfoundland here. I'll double click on it. It's going to add that into a list of the study area that I want to focus on. I'll click next, and I'll just give it a name, something descriptive to help us over the next hour related to the webinar. I'll call it webinar, and then the last thing I'm going to do is actually create a project. And that's just a seamless way of tying these two things together. I could actually go through and create my project first and then go define my study area, but in this workflow, it is an easy way to just combine the two. So we've now set our study area, called it webinar, and created a new project. Click Finish. The application will refresh at the extent that we want it to. And then all the analysis that you do will be done at this level, because the majority of the tools take the extent of the layers, or either the extent of the layer or the extent of the visible extent into consideration. So with that set up, we'll jump back to our slides, and I'll introduce you to the case study that we're going to work through. To help illustrate the capabilities of Business Analyst Desktop, getting ahead of myself. For the remainder of the webinar, we will use a case study for site expansion potential for a popular restaurant chain in St. John's, Newfoundland. Chess's famous fish and chips restaurant chain, located in St. John's, is a family-owned business that's well known for their food and friendly atmosphere. Over the course of their 60-year existence, the company has expanded to 6 locations across the province and remains popular within the community. There is sufficient interest within Chess's management to warrant opening another restaurant in the greater St. John's area. To reduce the risk of impacting existing restaurants, management wants to review opportunities where there is a similar demographic makeup compared to their existing restaurants. And to properly evaluate these new areas, an analysis of existing restaurants is necessary. A big part of Business Analyst is its ability to manage and analyze your business data. The first part of our analysis that we're going to work through is adding our store information, or in this case our restaurant information, and our customer data through a wizard-driven interface. The data we're using comes from a variety of sources, but it requires unique IDs, and these are leveraged for later on in the application through some of the workflows that I'll introduce you to. An example is the customer data set, where each customer would have a unique ID. But it would also be associated with its closest store. That, for example, that would mean the store that they would most likely go to. So now that we have our case study defined, and we've talked about some of the business information that we want to add to the map, the next thing we're going to do before I jump back to the application is to also add try to get a sense of the competitive landscape that exists and see the distribution of Chess's competitors in and around the greater St. John's area as well. So last week I talked about the Dun & Bradstreet data set that comes available with Business Analyst Online. That same data set is available within Business Analyst Desktop. For the purposes of our case study, we're going to be searching based on the North American Industry Classification System and the Standard Industrial Classification, or SIC codes, that will closely match those classifications that match Chess's restaurant. So your search results will be added to your map and presented in the table on the left-hand side of the application. So that's where we transition over to the application. So as I mentioned, the first thing we want to do is add in our restaurant information. So from the Business Analyst toolbar, I'll select Store Setup. I want to create a new store layer. And since I have data ready to go, I'll browse to that. But if you had an address table with just standard street addresses, you could easily import that in as well. Or if your data had latitude and longitude, that'll work as well. It's on my computer. I'll browse to it. So my restaurants data set here. I'll click Next. So under which field will contain the name of each store? All the stores have the same name, but the store ID is kind of its unique identifier, and that's also something that we want to identify here. Optionally, if you do have a logo for whatever analysis that you're going to be doing moving forward, you can browse to that here. I've already have the logo added into my my edition of Business Analyst, so that's easily something that I can reference later. I'll give it a name. I'll just leave it as restaurants, and then I'll click Finish. So now the screen refreshes, and I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, there are 5 restaurants added to the map, and the extent is changed so that it zooms in to the extent of the restaurants data set. Secondly, on the left-hand side of the screen, as I mentioned in the last slides before we transitioned back to the application, is your Business Analyst window. You'll notice that the project has updated to stay as webinar, and then under webinar we also have our study area and we have our restaurants, and that's key. So everything that we create is then stored within the webinar project. The second thing we'll do is we'll go back, and now that I've added my restaurant information, I'm going to add my customer information. So for the person who is well versed in ArcGIS, really this is just adding data, but the wizard does add a component that does connect these business layers, I'll call them, to be leveraged by other tools later on in our workflow. So I'm creating a new customer layer. Again, I have that data ready to go, and I'll browse to it on my computer, and I have it here. I'll add it. Here is my unique ID, remember, for my customers. For the sake of this session, we'll just leave it as the address field. But then again, remember I mentioned that each customer would be allocated to a specific store. And I'll give this a name. We'll just call it customers, and I'll click finish. And you'll notice that the data is then added to the map, the extent changes, and similar to if you have experience working with subtypes and adding a layer with subtypes onto your map, the data is symbolized to reflect the different stores. If I switch away from the Business Analyst window here back to my table of contents, which never goes away, again, you're just working in ArcMap, you can see here that I have my Symbology here, and I can easily adjust that. I mentioned before I can change the symbol to the chassis logo. I can do that here, and even adjust the draw order so that my chassis locations always draw on top of my customers. Switch back to my Business Analyst window, and now I have restaurants, customers, and then the last thing I want to do is I'll actually turn off the customer information for this, just to illustrate what I want to accomplish. The last thing I'll do is we'll add business listings. So these are your competitor listings. So again, as I mentioned on the slides, on the left-hand side, you would go from the Business Analyst toolbar through the menu and go to search for these listings. Now, if you knew the business name you were going to target, for example, if Boston Pizza was a direct competitor to Chess's, or if McDonald's was a direct competitor to Chess's, then you could type that name in here. But we want to take advantage of these classification codes that are built into the Dun & Bradstreet data. So to get access to that, we click on Classic View, and we have to do two things. The first one is we actually just need to give it a name. That's the third thing. The first one is we have to define the location. If you don't define the location, it's actually going to go out and add business information across the country, and that's not overly relevant, and the compute time for that would probably cripple my computer. So what we'll do is we'll just select based on the location, and the location can be based on geographic criteria. So I could easily type in St. John's here again and find that, or I could even just take advantage of the actual extent that I'm working in. And to do that, I click on this radio button here at the top. So now it's only going to show me the business listings, my competitor business listings that fall within the extent. And the dialog box that it's called is select location. That's quite fitting, because ultimately that's what you're doing. It's a select by location. So we'll do that. We'll click OK. So now that's set to current extent. I can see some of the business information that's coming up here, and that's fine. The last thing I'll do that'll actually make it completely relevant to what we're doing is I'm actually going to search. Now, I did mention that you could search by either NAICS or by SIC code, but ultimately searching for one is in turn searching for searching for the other, at least in this case. So I have my my business type dialog window open, and the SIC code that I'm interested in, again, you'll recall from our slides, is 5812. As you type it in, more and more information will pop up in the results. Now, I'm not overly picky about differentiating between the type of competition, so whether Chesses competes against ethnic food, whether it's Chinese restaurants or German or Greek or Indian, Italian, and so on. I'm just going to class them all as eating places, and that's going to add it down here to my selected one, my selected SIC codes, and I'll click OK. So now my business listing is complete. I'm ready to run this. So the result, when I click Finish, it'll go out, it'll query the Dun & Bradstreet data and add only those restaurants that match the SIC code and that are within the extent that I defined. Points on a map are useful in this case, but they're not, to provide a little bit more context to it, you could actually go back to the table of contents and look at the attribute table for the competition file that's been produced. So here you can see all of the company names and their addresses of where they're located. If I scroll over to the right, I can actually see their sales volume, which is useful. And there's a lot more information that can be stored in these things. But sales volume is actually the attribute that we are interested in, at least for this next part before I transition back to the slides. So we'll leave that leave the attribute table closed, and then I'll open here, and I will go to our Symbology, and I'll set a graduated symbol specifically to target the sales volume. Now, this is going to just change the symbols proportionally based on the size, the value of the sales that's been captured for each point. I'll change the labels so they're a little bit more descriptive, and I'll click Apply. Refresh my screen, and now, even if I actually move my restaurants layer up to the top again, the label's a bit big, so it may not be overly useful to have that on there. So we'll move it down again. But you can see that now these, based on sales volume, these are competitors to Chesses. And with that, I'll transfer back to the slides, and we'll move on to looking at exactly how we will go about evaluating the existing sites. So now that we've added this data to the map and we've supplemented it with our business listings, we can use the tools that are available within Business Analyst to analyze the existing sites and then rank them according to their performance. That is sales per capita. A broad workflow that we're going to follow is for existing restaurants, we're going to generate equal competition trade areas, then append demographic data to those trade areas, and then finally rank them. Then based on the results of the existing sites, we're actually going to evaluate candidate locations, and that's the last thing we're going to do in this webinar. We're going to evaluate those candidate locations to see the likelihood of a new restaurant succeeding when compared to their benchmark location. Now, if you're familiar with the Chesses restaurant chain, you know that their freshwater location is actually their original location, and it's the most popular location. So that, in and of itself, when I show you the attributes, it's quite clear which one is their benchmark location. When evaluating existing sites or restaurants, in this case, it is possible to delineate trade areas that represent equal competition. Such areas, or Thyssen or Voronoi polygons, define the area closest to each store relative to all the other store locations. The example on screen, or for the example on screen, equal competition areas are drawn around each site, so the site shown in green. The areas generated are nearest to each contained site relative to all the other surrounding sites. And the perpendicular lines drawn in red are relative to the site locations to define areas closest to each one. This type of trade area assumes that consumers will travel to the closest store or facility. And we're going to use this in our analysis of Chess's existing restaurants. If you're familiar with desktop geoprocessing, the Append Data tool uses the overlay method to extract data from one layer, such as dissemination areas, and aggregate it to a trade area. In this case, it's going to be our equal trade areas. This method can help you answer questions like, what is the per capita income of this trade area? Or what are the demographic characteristics of customers living in this area? For our case study, we're going to be interested in the aggregate household income and daytime population, those that are at work, so that we can calculate per capita income, per capita sales, and per capita sales for daytime population at work. The last thing we'll do is rank the existing trade areas based on the values calculated. The rank markets tool in Business Analyst can create either an analysis trade area or report that allows you to rank geographies in your market using one or more demographic variables. In the rank markets analysis, there's an option to generate a report that includes an average rank field. For what we're going to be working with, the data set that actually gets produced, and as you can see on screen, has an attribute that's written directly to the data set that ranks in this case, the trade areas. With that, we'll switch back, and I'll turn off my competition layer, and I'll go back to my Business Analyst window. So I have my restaurants on screen, and the first thing, recall from our workflow, is that we want to generate trade areas. To do that, we go to the Business Analyst toolbar, and from the menu drop-down, we choose Trade Area. I want to create a new trade area. And now, there are popular trade areas, so you can do just a simple ring, which is ultimately a distance-defined buffer, or you could do drive time analysis as well. That's something that can also be done, and whether it's based on minutes or distance, that's entirely up to you. Again, what we're going to be focusing on are equal competition trade areas. So we'll select that here. You can read a bit of a description, and then we'll click Next. It knows which, so Business Analyst, the actual wizard, will know which store actually contains, which layer contains your stores. So in this case, it's restaurants. It also wants to know which field contains the store ID. So by default, it went to the business field, but in fact, it's the store ID field. I want to run this on all the stores, but if I wanted to just run it on a few stores, I could do that, but the restriction of the tool requires that there are 3 sites minimum, and there are only 5 to evaluate, so we'll just leave that as all. I'll click Next. Here, I'll give it a name. I'll actually leave it as equal competition, and we'll just call it trade area. Optionally, if I wanted to, something that we won't be covering in this webinar, I could actually generate demographic reports that summarize these areas and actually even append that same data back to the decent polygons that we're going to create. But that's kind of beyond the scope of where we're going today. So I'll click Finish. I'll run this tool, and you'll see the result in a couple of seconds added to the map. We have a result added to the map. And I'll zoom back in based on this. Actually, what I might do is actually even just change the display on this, to change the transparency, just so we can see the content that's underneath it a little bit. There, that's a bit better. So we'll do that. So we have our trade areas defined now. The next thing we want to do is actually to look at any of the demographic information that could be associated with those trade areas. So to do that, we're actually going to be using the Append tool. And so retrace our steps. We go back to the Business Analyst toolbar through the menu and choose Analysis, I'll create a new analysis. For this side of, for this part of the analysis, we're actually going to be doing market analysis. When we're looking at candidate sites, we'll switch over to the site analysis side. But we'll leave it as market analysis. Specifically, we're interested in appending data. So again, the description here will say, so you use the append tool to append demographic variables to a boundary or trade area. Exactly what we want to do. Click next. Now, this is important. So you want to leave this as is for the business analyst data, but for which layer you want to inherit the data, you need to go back to your equal competition trade area. So I'll click next on that. And now this is where we can actually go through and define individual variables that are going to be of interest to us. So recall from before that we were interested in per capita income, per capita sales, and then per capita sales for daytime population at work. To get to that point, we're gonna search for this information. So luckily, I don't have to go through and really expand all of these options for variables. I can actually use the filter. So I know that the first one I'm looking for is the aggregate household income. So to search for income, it's quite simple. You just type in income. And then based on that, I know that for the current year, or for the most current year that's available within Business Analyst Desktop, that's 2014. I'll expand that information. Here I have household income, and if I scroll down, I have all of the cohorts, then I have how it's broken down, and then finally here I have the aggregate variable. And now just by double-clicking on that, it comes into my selected variables list, and then I can keep going. The next one I'm actually interested in, or the next two rather, relate to population. So I can just type in population, and there are a lot more variables available for this, but I'm really just interested in 2014, and specifically those that are 15 years or older. So I'll double click on that, add that in, and then the last one I'm actually going to search for relates to daytime population. So I could just type in population and search my way through it, but I can also just type in daytime. And this will bring up the 2014 values, and for this I'm specifically interested in daytime population at work. And what I'm left with are my three variables. So I have my total population of 15 years and older, my aggregate household income, and finally the variable that I just added, the daytime population at work. I can give it a name that'll make it a bit more appealing, but for now I can just leave this as Append Data. Click Finish, and that'll get added to the map. So that's been added to the map. I'll just clean this up a bit so we can see that. And the next thing we want to do is actually calculate some of these, take advantage of these variables that we've actually created. So what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to be adding a couple of fields. So similar to what we're already used to doing in ArcMap and in other types of analysis that we're doing, what we want to do is actually calculate. The first one is per capita income. So we'll just type in just a quick abbreviated name for it here. So per capita income, and we know that that is a double field. We'll click OK. Then, just using some basic field calculator math, I know here that actually my field aliases are turned on. So if I turn them off, you'll see that the corresponding names show up here in the field calculator. So we'll drag this off to the side. So per capita income, that's the aggregate income divided by the total population that could be working. Click OK. Now that's added to the map. I can go in, adjust my numeric field. so that now I have a good representation of per capita income for each of these trade areas that I've defined. Next, we'll do per capita sales. So per cap sales. Click OK. And now, something that I'll draw your attention to now is that for each of these restaurants, we've included the sales volume for each of these restaurants. And that actually comes directly from Business Analyst Desktop as well. So knowing that, we can calculate the per capita sales based on the entire population, but then we can also compare that to the per capita sales for the daytime population. So the first one we'll do, and then we'll replicate it, is for the entire population. So we'll clear that, and now we're looking at sales volume divided by the entire working population. So per capita sales, we're looking, I'll just change the properties here so they update. So now we're looking, now these trade areas are large too, so these numbers can be slightly inflated. But if you were to actually go to the CHES's website and see what meals cost, then for a family of 3 or 4, then there's potential that these costs do make a little bit more sense. Finally, we'll add one more field, and then this is just per capita. We'll just call it work. And instead of the total population, I'm really just interested in the working daytime population. Calculate that again, and now we've got a number that probably more closely reflects the values for this, and that's all. We've been able to derive this all using the Append Data tool, and just some basic field calculations. The last thing we'll do is we'll actually go about and we'll actually rank our markets. So again, from the Business Analyst menu here in the toolbar, I'll choose Analysis. I'll create a new analysis, and now I'm going to rank them. Now, again, this is going to take a number of variables into consideration. The specific ones we want to evaluate on relate to sales per capita and sales per capita based on the working population. The input layer that I'm interested in relates to my Append Data, because that's where I did all my calculations, and then specify the name field. This can be any text field that it finds, but we'll just leave the store ID as the name field. That'll be fine. Click next. The primary field for ranking, just to evaluate the store of how it's actually performing. You could actually leave that as sales volume, but for the purposes of this webinar, we'll change it up and we'll just look at how the sales compare to the total population that's actually working. So we'll click on that, click next, and then here we can actually add in any additional fields that could be worthwhile. So here I'll add in my sales volume, per capita sales, and per capita income. And for the sake of the demonstration, I can even add in the rest of these as well. And they'll all, now the primary one is still going to be this per capita income based on the total population working, but you can see it'll actually produce a table to show you how these could rank if you change the variables, change the primary ranking variable. Click next, and here's the table that I was talking about. So Here you can see per capita working. That's the highest value we have here. But if you actually work your way along and see how, you can actually see how the numbers change. So it's a very quick way to rank markets dependent upon a specific variable. We'll click next. We'll leave that as is, and that'll get added to the map. So we have that information added to the map, and the last thing, as I showed you on the slide, there will be a rank number attribute that's added, and what we can do is we can go ahead and label the map based on that rank number. By default, it was going with the name of the store, which I had assigned to be the store ID. But we'll just we'll give it a color here, and now now you'll see on screen I've got the ranking of how these stores are actually performing based on the trade areas that we've defined. So with that done, we'll transition back to our slides and we'll continue on with the last part of the webinar. The last part of our analysis is going to focus on finding similar sites that can perform as well as an existing location. To facilitate this, we're going to use the Rank Similar Sites tool. The Rank Similar Sites tool can be used to score potential new sites against a known well-performing site. In this case, it's called a master site. It allows you to score point locations by associating those points with underlying geography polygons and the characteristics, that is, demographic variables of that polygon. There are two techniques available for this tool, which can be applied actually to points or to trade areas. The example that you see on the screen is applied to drive time trade areas. What we'll work through today is actually relates to trade areas that are defined based on a buffer of the candidate locations. But the two techniques that are available, the first one compares values of up to 5 demographic variables between the master site and the scored sites, where you assign a plus or minus percentage of the master site that you want each of the new site values to fall within. So that's your kind of base and floor and ceiling. The second one is actually much more powerful. That relates to a principal component analysis, where you create groups or factors of like variables. This approach ranks trade areas around each of the scored sites by comparing each of the scored site variable groups with the same variable group of the master site. So we'll transition back to Business Analyst Desktop, and we'll walk through that analysis. To do that, the first thing we need to do is, actually I'll turn on my restaurant layer just to add to the map. The first thing we want to do is actually add in our candidate sites, and to do that, you still go through the Business Analyst menu, choose Store Setup, and in this case, I have map ready data. It's on my computer. I keep it in a geodatabase, and I just have it here. It's called Candidates. Now, the way this tool works, it looks for again a lot of the same things that other tools have looked for. So I'll set my store ID. Oh. We can just set a new one for today. And click Next. I want to call this Candidates. Finish, and it's going to add it to the map. What I was going to say before was these actual locations, the candidate locations, also for for the Rank Similar Sites tool to work, you have to actually include a master site. Now you can actually look outside of the analysis layer, but it helps to have all that information captured. So here, just in my, I'll just change the color of this so it's a bit more visible. Here I have my candidates down here at the bottom, and then here in the middle. But I also have one that directly coincides with my master site. This is the freshwater location. So to launch the analysis tool, back through the analysis menu, I'll create a new analysis, but rather than doing market analysis, I'm doing a site analysis. And this one, there's a lot you can do. After I walk through this workflow, I'll talk briefly about how you can leverage customer data to actually define the best new location for a store, or a restaurant in this case. But for what we're going to be looking at, we want to choose the Rank Similar Sites. Click Next. So here I have my candidate sites. It's already picked that up. And my buffer distance that I want to set, I'll just set that to 1 kilometer. Again, that's a 1 kilometer buffer, and of which the tool is going to go through based on where the candidate site is, look at the underlying census geographic boundaries. In this case, it's going to be the dissemination areas, and check to see where the variables that I defined, if they're within that floor-to-ceiling range. So I set my buffer. Here I'll leave this as is for my demographic data where I'm pulling my information from, and just my master site, I know that this name here relates to my freshwater location. Click Next. Now, if I was going to do principal component analysis, this is where I would enter the number of sites that I wanted to rank and go further with it. But because I'm just doing the conventional find similar method, I'll just select that and click Next. Here, this is where I'll actually search for and define my values, or define my variables. So here, I'm interested in household income. So here, I'll type in income. So for the current year, 2014, I'm interested in the average household income, not the aggregate income. The aggregate income was specifically used to calculate the per capita income value. So I'll double click on that, and the range that I want to set is plus or minus 10%. Once I set this one, I can go on to the next, define the next variable, and I'll search for daytime in this case. So I want daytime population. At work. Again, I want it to be within that 10% range. And then finally, the last one I'll look at is something that's a new one. This one actually relates to food and the proportion of their income that they spend on food annually. So I'll type in food. I'll type in food. So under total food, I'll just choose this option here. So it's the food purchased from restaurants. Double click on, bear with me a second. There we go. Okay, so we've got this set up. Using my traditional method, I'll quickly redefine these. Not a big deal. My 10% value, my daytime value at work, again 10% as well, and then the last one is food. And that'll also be my 10% range that I'm actually going to be looking at. I'll click Next. I'll leave the name as is, and we'll just run the tool. So what you're looking at on screen is how these 1 kilometer buffers, or really these new trade areas, have been ranked. And so in the table of contents, you can see here that red, or this darker orange, represents your number 1 site. That makes sense. Your number 1 site is always going to be, or for the majority of the time, it's going to be your master site. That's the one that it's actually being compared to. Off of that, you'll also have how your candidate sites rank compared to that. So second for that duller orange, and then third for yellow. Now if I open up my attribute table, I can see here that similar to how I ranked my existing markets, I also have how an attribute of how these candidate sites are ranked. And now I've compared it to within, again, the 10% range of what exists within the master site at the freshwater location. From the attributes here, you can actually see that these relate to popular shopping centers. So this one actually relates to the Avalon Mall, but the other one that also ranks quite similar, at least in the context of this tool, is the Village Shopping Center as well. Both can be popular locations, and both can potentially have a much larger draw than what the 1 kilometer buffer can define, that can pull together, because it's just looking at the census geography underneath. If you wanted to take this further, you could actually look at the customer data itself, and then based on weights within the customer data, you can define where a new location could be, and then actually compare that information to how the sites were actually ranked, to see roughly what the distance is in comparison between the two results. So to wrap things up, this webinar provided an overview of Business Analyst Desktop through a case study which focused on a popular fish and chip restaurant chain in St. John's, Newfoundland. In the process, you learned how to get access to the application and ultimately make it work for you. You also learned how to add your own business information and even add competitor information. This can all be easily applied to analysis or even a capstone project that your students are working with as well. Beyond that, you actually performed some simple trade area analysis, and then based on the trade area analysis and an additional ranking analysis that you've done, you were able to identify sites which can be recommended to CHES's management for further consideration. A reminder to keep your eyes peeled for future webinars from our group that focus on helping you and your students get more out of the geodatabase with regards to geodatabase behavior and enforcing attribute data integrity, and also working with the Canadian Municipal Data Model. That's a model that plays a central role in Ezra Canada's Community Maps program and GeoFoundation Exchange. But also look out for webinars that focus on ArcGIS Online. So we'll be doing ones that relate to working with our mobile application, the collector application, and how it can also leverage the geodatabase and related tables and relationship classes. We'll also touch briefly on analysis workflows and also on web application templates, and then extending those web application templates with the ArcGIS API for JavaScript. On behalf of the Education and Research Group, I want to thank you for tuning in today. The recording for this webinar is going to be available within the next couple of days, but if you have any questions about any of the content that's been covered, please feel free to contact me directly. My contact details are on screen, and we'll be in touch.